Let's get it cracking, man. What's up, y'all? It's Playback Appeal in here, man. The Rap Geeks, Aaron tuning in with you.
And I'm Sean.
So today, let's jump right into this, man. Something legendary for the underground cats out there. And if y'all haven't heard of Quasimodo, you're gonna learn about him today. So today, 20 years ago, the album The Unseen was released. All right, y'all.
Right. And The Unseen is a debut album by Quasimodo. It's a hip hop duo of the producer Madlib and his alter ego, Lord Quas. And
Oh
this was
yeah.
released on Stone's Throw Records on June 13th, 2020, which marks today as its 20-year anniversary.
20 years ago, man.
Right.
All right. Well, so what was some first thoughts that you had coming into the album this time around?
Well, before we even get into that, let's talk a little bit about Madlib
All
because
right.
I think it's important to give people some background information.
Yes, at the context,
Madlib
please.
Madlib is one of the most critically acclaimed hip hop producers of all time. This dude's put out legendary albums. Most probably well known is Mad Villain, which was Mad Villainy, which was a collab between MF Doom and Madlib. He's also done work with J Dilla under the name J-Lib, and of course with most recently Freddie Gibbs under the moniker Mad Gibbs. So Madlib is from Oxnard, California, and he describes himself as the DJ first, producer second, MC last. I think that's funny because to me he's producer first, DJ second, and MC never. Because the dude is known for never ever going out into the public spotlight. I think there's less than 3 interviews of him online from what I've seen on YouTube. But this is a really interesting part of Madlib's career because it's actually quite early and it's his debut album under Quasimodo. And what a debut album to come out with, and especially to put it out on Stone's Throw Records, which is owned by Peanut Butter Wolf. I believe he's the president. And Peanut Butter Wolf, although the Stone's Throw Records is based out of LA and it's been huge, prolifically influential in the LA scene, being that it's a revival of the 60s and 70s Motown type soul infused with modern day hip hop beats. Peanut Butter Wolf, originally from San Jose, so we got to give him a shout out because we are a Bay Area podcast.
408 in his thing.
Right. So the background of the album is that Madlib did a week long. Pretty hard to believe if this album was made in a week, but I would guess the main creativity behind it maybe. He went on a week long mushroom trip while creating the album, and that became The Unseen.
That's a trip. And pardon the pun, but that is a trip because it's like, even me when I get lit and try to produce, sometimes it's too technical and I'm too lit to, you know what I mean, to be pushing buttons and twisting knobs. You know what I'm saying? So he had to, and this shows the level of geek that Madlib's coming into as far as the production, how technical he is with all his equipment under the influence. You know what I mean? As good as this album is, so tripping on shrooms while making a whole album, you gotta, you know, that's a tip of the hat to you, Madlib, man. That's just crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And prior to this, I believe he was primarily known for his work on the Loot Pack, which is another hip hop group that he did with a couple other guys. based out of Long Beach. I believe another guy was Wild Child. And Madlib was primarily, I want to say, a vocalist on the Loot Pack. He was primarily a rapper slash producer.
It's interesting that he says that he doesn't really like his voice, but I feel like his voice is actually really good. As far as the lyrics go, I mean, obviously it's not highly conscious or rappy rap. It's a little bit more conversational. But I think the voice itself is pretty distinct and interesting to listen to.
Yeah, and for those that are not familiar with Quasimodo, what Madlib does within his albums that he releases under Lord Quas is he pitches it up really high. And so I believe the animation of Lord Quas looks something like a yellow Elmo fuzzy antelope. And then the voice of Lord Quas sounds almost childlike. But what really makes Quasimodo so interesting is despite this childlike demeanor of Lord Quas, the lyrics are explicit, and oftentimes he's talking about running away from the cops, or he's talking about, I mean, it's a whole batch of different things that he raps on, and it isn't traditionally hip hop, and it really just paints the limelight of Quaz going throughout his day and experiencing all these interactions he's having and all these thoughts he's having as if he himself was on the mushroom trip and he was documenting his thoughts while on it.
Yeah, I wonder how the high pitch. I wonder how him manipulating his voice felt while he was tripping. I feel like that might have added to the high.
Right. And even talking about the high, I think there's an element that we need to get into, which is this reminds me a lot of an era of jazz known as the acid jazz era, which kind of mixed elements of psychedelic rock music, but with jazz instrumentation. And I think what makes this album so unique is there's really nothing that sounds like it. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this is well known that Madlib's sampling style is out of this world. And his sampling style is almost as free jazz itself. In that it's just the sounds that are being sampled are being played unconventionally. They're not within the constraints of a 4-bar count. Just the standard on beat, off beat slicing. It's mixed of I would say offsetted slices mixed with some crazy. It's played unconventionally, and so that definitely adds to how trippy this whole album sounds.
Yeah, I agree. And a great example of that is the track Realize, which is one of the highlights, where the track starts with the sample of Cannabis, the rapper, and then it just crashes straight into a flute that sounds like something that could have came out of a classic 1960 Sean Connery James Bond film. And the transition is so cut and choppy as if he was a turntablist. And then the song hits another transition with another sample, and it goes into a song called High as Apple Lie by Charles Wright and the Watts, which is a song that was also used on the track Hard Piano by Pusha T on his album Daytona. So there's really never a dull moment on the album because, for one, the tracks are really short in length, almost like a modern hip hop song. And this was the 2000s where hip hop songs were really pushing 5 minutes. And here's Madlib at the 149 mark or the 230 mark on each of these songs with, well over 20 tracks on the album. I believe there's
Yeah, about
24 tracks on the
24.
album. And this is what modern rappers do. They put out really short ADHD type music for consumption, and Madlib in some ways was maybe one of the first ones to do it. And because of the choppiness of the sampling, it's always grabbing your attention, so you never truly lose focus of it, and it makes for a wild experience and a journey that he's curated for the listener from front to end.
Yeah, if I can dive into that topic, and I want to mention something that you talked about earlier that I gotta disagree with. You mentioned that Madlib considers himself DJ first, producer second, and rapper third. And I gotta
That's
agree.
that's his own. That's his own.
Yeah, yeah, and I gotta agree with that more than your disagreement with that. In that, I mean, somebody that's a producer first, they don't. So when we talk about sampling a lot for this particular album, and so one of the greatest skills of a DJ is their skill of curation.
Correct.
And so what Madlib did was you he mixed that skill of curation with the production side. So without that, then you would just have somebody that can make music. Anybody that's just a producer can be able to just make a track on GarageBand because you got all the instruments and you can play notes. But somebody that actually has a taste, a specific taste in music, that has a DJ side can actually put a bunch of different sounds together to make a cohesive track or a project. And that's exactly what this album is. So I say without the skill of a DJ, this album wouldn't be this way. And I mean, his work wouldn't be the way that it is without that highly skilled curation.
I gotta agree with you. I understand where you're coming from. I think there's a track on here called Low Class Conspiracy where Madlib is taking a sample from Mellow Mood, a song by Jimmy Smith and Wes Montgomery, and he's performing what I would even call as live DJing on the track. So maybe you might be right about that. But I think it goes far beyond DJing because to me, DJing means there's a live element to it and there's a crowd. But maybe I would classify him more as a turntablist or a someone that truly is a crate digger. So as I was listening to that song, Low Class Conspiracy, a thought popped in my head where I came to the realization that this album, The Unseen, is a is an album that's truly made for the producer's ear. And what I mean by that is this is not the type of album you can throw at the average hip hop fan who's just barely getting into the art and maybe they've been listening to some Schoolboy Q and Joey Badass. I think someone to appreciate this album, they do have to either be familiar with one, the concept of searching for classic vinyl records, two, have tried mixing and producing themselves, or three, was around during this era of hip hop, and was around during the era of the Zion Eyes and the Black Stars to truly appreciate the unseen and what it's about.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend this to a new hip hop listener. You would have to definitely be around, what I mean, be around the neighborhood to appreciate the work that went into this album.
Right, right. So, what really makes this album unique and Quasimodo sound unique is the way that the production and the rapping works in unison. So, what I mean by that is the shine is always on the production, but Lord Quaz's vocals, his uncanny high pitched vocals, are just sitting on top of the craziness and the abstraction of the production. And really, when you think about hip hop at this time, it was primarily just taking a sample and looping it for 6 seconds and rapping over it. But the beauty of Quasimodo is, although that's still there and it's evidently there, there is this new element of, yes, I'm going to play a sample, but I'm going to take another element from a different sample and I'm going to do what Jay Dilla and No ID have done for years, which is there's going to be a human element to this, a human element to the 303 or the MPC, which is not everything is going to be synced on time. So let me explain. There's a track here called Basic Instinct, and it's a normal jazz instrumentation sample. But what Quaz does is you never really know when there's going to be the drums, the loud, punchy drums. They might come in a quarter note of a quarter note late. There might be a slight delay to it and might come in a little bit early. So there's this level of anticipation that you have because you're so used to listening to hip hop. But what Quaz does is he keeps you on your feet. He doesn't want you to expect anything. And at any moment, the drums could drop. At any moment, there could be a transition. At any moment, you could hear some weird sound of rain. You could hear some weird sound that you're not expecting. And I think that's the element of DJing that he brings into the production studio.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that the change of, I mean, that's a main part of DJing a set. Is controlling the flow of the project. Within the project, and Madlib does that masterfully in here. Within each of the songs and song to song. You'll have one sample that got one rhythm, and then out of nowhere it'll smack you with a whole new sample, come in and drop the beat, come in with a whole new vibe, and that again goes back to the DJ aspect of Madlib.
Yeah, and I want to say that what really puts Madlib really in the same category of producer gods like Jay Dilla is how they find these records from the 60s that just really would be showing up in the Goodwill in the 99 cents section. Very undervalued, underappreciated songs that I'm guessing to some extent Madlib might have grew up on or he was searching for. And through those pieces of work that were never utilized for hip hop, he'll find something that's beautiful in it and then sample it for his own instrumentation. And as maybe we've had in a previous conversation, it's maybe why Kanye West wanted to work with him. As you guys know, The Life of Pablo, Madlib had a song called No More Parties in LA, which featured Kendrick and Kanye. And I would think that admiration that Kanye has for Madlib and his ability to find diamonds in the rough is why he's been such a heralded producer and someone that I would think many people want to work with, but not a lot of people get that opportunity because he can be picky about it.
Yeah, when we talk about producers and my favorite samplers, the people who are just nobody can sample a track in the way that they can, and that's people like Kanye and that's people like Madlib, and coming from the producer perspective, I mean, we can all sample. It's super easy nowadays. It's a simple drag and drop. You pick your spot and then play it on beat. These cats, they don't usually sample a song that we all know. In addition to that, they won't sample they'll take a part of the song that you would have never thought you could sample and make something great out of. And so that's why I appreciate the hell out of these two.
Yeah, and to expand on the geniusness of Madlib,
Genius.
the genius of Madlib. There's a track called Return of the Loop Digger. And in that song, Madlib is literally having discourse with Lord Quaz. And Lord Quaz is in a record shop, and he's asking if there's specific records that he's looking for, that he wants the Grant Green. And he says, I'm looking for the 1968 version. I'm not look on Atlantic Records. I'm not looking for the 1958 Blue Note Records version. And just that level of being a vinyl head, of being someone, I would think the modern day Madlib would probably be spending 4 hours a day on Discogs, trying to figure out who pressed this record, what's the quality on it, what's the price on it, what year was it pressed. And Madlib is having this discourse with Lord Quaz about the records they're trying to buy, and then he leaves because they don't have what he's looking for. And while this is happening, there are like 5 samples going on with 1960s and early 1970s artists all throughout the rock, blues, R&B space. And so that it's almost him braggadociously showing his attention to detail. And what's really interesting about the dynamic between Madlib and Lord Quaz, yeah, they're the same person, but they're two sides of the coin. On one hand, I think Lord Quaz represents the inner thoughts that Madlib has that are more aligned with the modern day rapper, which is to talk about drugs, which is to have thoughts about sex. And then there's Madlib, the stoic producer, and he's balancing between these two. And this album, The Unseen, is capturing the internal dialogue of Lord Quaz and Madlib within the confines of a Quasimodo.
Hell yeah, well said. Well said, dude. So, man, I gotta ask you. What joints were your favorite out of this project?
So my favorite joints on this project, I'm gonna say, like, I love Microphone Mathematics. That's one that I think really sticks out to me in terms of his rapping ability. I love Low Class Conspiracy, Basic Instinct. I like 24/7 because it features MED, and the whole album is never dull. I want to say that. I want to say that when Madlib was producing The Unseen, he never probably intended any songs to stick out. Probably the whole time that he was making this album, the intention was to create something that would be appropriately heard on a vinyl record or maybe even a cassette from front to back. And so Jazz Cats Part 1 is interesting because he's talking about multiple Blue Note Records artists, and he's saying that he listens to the likes of Sun Ra, like Horace Silver, Donald Byrd, Lee Morgan, The Weather Report, Cannonball Adderley, Freddie Hubert, and the list really goes on and on. And this is him saying this in 2000, that who he looks up to, the Dizzy Gillespies, the Thelonious Monks of the world, are not the people that traditional hip hop producers are looking at for inspiration. I would think at that time, Dr. Dre was the biggest producer in the world. And here's Lord Quaz, Madlib, talking about jazz. And in many ways, to me, the way Madlib approaches the turntable, the way he produces production, the way he approaches crate digging and finding elements of different songs and compiling them is truly the way a jazz artist like John Coltrane approaches the trumpet. And so his legacy is more so should be respected as on the same tier of a jazz musician and a composer rather than the average hip hop producer.
Yeah, this album definitely dances between the lines of jazz and hip hop. Um, and depending on the song, it could fall a little bit more on the jazz side than the hip hop boom bappiness that we all know and love.
What were your favorites?
I liked the Low Class Conspiracy. That album, I mean, it's all relevant, today. Just the mistreatment of the police, for the lower class, right? You know what I mean? The song Astro Black and Astro Traveling and Axe Puzzles. I liked all of those. They had a lot of dreamy samples and psychedelic feeling to them that I appreciated. Yeah, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think you and I, in terms of the archive of Stone's Throw Records, there's a lot to go through. I mean, this record label has truly identified a scene that's surprisingly coming out of LA and not Detroit. And Madlib's presence alone on that record label, I think, had a big influence on the likes of a Mayer Hawthorne, a J Rock, a John Wayne, a Knowledge, the the likes of Mind Design, Sam I Am, maybe not Aloe Black, but maybe Damn Funk. I would think just spending time with Madlib influenced all of these guys to really push their production game higher, because it's incredibly difficult to be in the same space as that guy and not want to be the best producer you can be.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to compete with somebody like Madlib in that regard. As quiet as he is, a lot of his personality is presented in his music. This isn't just a guy sampling. You know, this shows a highly technical jazz hip hop musician, and that translates extremely well in all of these songs.
Yeah, truly agreed, man. Couldn't have been said better. For me, this is it's not Madlib's best work, but it's highly worth listening to because it's just him. He's not working with anybody else. And and I think that when he works with other people like a Freddie Gibbs or a Jay Dilla, he might be confined to wanting to blend in with what they're offering. But if you want to hear Madlib in full effect and you want to hear his crazy geniusness, you want to hear what he has to offer, The Unseen is an album that is essential listening.
It is essential. It's essential, man. Soulful hip hop. It's rare that you get a hip hop album like this that's just full of so much soul, and it's raw. It's literally raw. It literally went straight from a SP303 into a cassette 8-track recorder
Wow.
directly into your ears. So it is definitely an experience to have, and we at Rap Geeks recommend that if you haven't heard this album, check this motherfucker out, man. For real.
Absolutely. You have any last thoughts?
None for me, man. Just listen. Please go listen to this, man. Click the link. If you haven't heard of Madlib or heard the Unseen album, check that out.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. You can find Playback Appeal and the Rap Geeks anywhere where podcasts are found, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or right here on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up. And if you've heard this album before, we're curious to hear your thoughts, so you can leave a comment below. We would like to know your thoughts on Quasimodo's The Unseen.
It's Lizzie and it's Sean. It's Rap Geeks, Playback Appeal.
Peace.
Thank you for listening.